Donald Trump came back promising to make America great again. But this time, America does not look like the thing he is protecting. It looks like the thing he is using. That is the difference. The first Trump said, America had been humiliated by the world. Bad wars, bad borders, bad deals, a country drained by everyone else. And he sold himself as the man who would stop it. But the second Trump came back after a defeat he never accepted. And suddenly, the mission changed. It was no longer just about restoring America. It was about proving Trump was never really defeated. Enemies at home, enemies abroad, institutions that resisted him. All of it started to point in the same direction. Not restraint, not protection, possession. The man who promised to stop America from being used by the world came back using America to settle his score with it. And that is why this version of Trump feels different. The slogan did not change, the hunger behind it did. The first Trump did not need America to conquer anything. He needed America to feel like it had been robbed. That was the power of 2016. Not a clean ideology, but a country that felt cheated out of its future. Factories gone, borders weak, wars lost, money wasted, and ordinary Americans told to clap while the country was being emptied. Trump's advantage was not that he invented the anger. He gave it a face. He took every humiliation people could feel but could not organize, and turned it into one sentence. Make America great again. But greatness back then did not sound like expansion. It sounded like recovery. Bring back the jobs, the troops, the money. Bring back respect. It was not a promise to own more of the world. It was a promise to stop losing pieces of America to it. That is why the first Trump worked. He made protection feel aggressive. He made withdrawal feel powerful. He made saying no feel like winning. And for millions of people, that was enough. Because when a country believes it has been robbed, the first man who says, I will stop the bleeding, does not sound dangerous. He sounds necessary. But there is a trap inside that kind of politics. Because once you convince a country it has been stripped of what it earned, the next question becomes obvious. Who pays it back? At first, the answer was simple. China pays, NATO pays, Mexico pays. The corrupt system pays. That was still the first Trump. Aggressive but defensive. The country had lost something and he was going to get it back. But when Trump returned, that language became darker. Because getting it back no longer had a clear limit. If America was robbed, then pressure becomes justice. Threats become negotiation. Punishment becomes strength. And taking starts sounding like recovery. That is the mutation. Greatness stopped meaning repair. It started meaning repayment. Everyone who benefited from America's weakness had to be squeezed. And this is where Make America Great Again becomes dangerous. Because the slogan does not tell you where recovery ends. It does not tell you when protection becomes possession. And once punishment starts sounding like necessity, the map starts to change. Because this is not just about one man changing. It is about an older American belief finding its way back through him. Older than Trump, older than MAGA, older than the rallies and the red hats. The belief that America does not need to control the whole world, only the world close enough to threaten it. The hemisphere, the roots, the resources. For decades, America dressed this belief in cleaner language. Security, influence, strategic interest. But underneath, the message was always colder. This side of the world belongs under American power. And Trump did not need to invent that. He only needed to make it shameless again. That is why the map suddenly starts speaking. Greenland means Arctic power, military reach, rare minerals, and the future routes that open when ice stops protecting the old world. Panama means the canal, global shipping, Chinese influence, and the narrow throat through which American trade can be squeezed. Canada means resources, border leverage, and the humiliation of turning a close ally into something he can mock as property. Venezuela means oil, migration, military pressure, and a warning that the hemisphere still has an owner. Cuba means the old island America, never fully stopped trying to bend, now pulled again into sanctions, pressure, and regime change language. This is where the second Trump becomes different from a normal isolationist. Because an isolationist wants to stay out. Trump does not want to stay out. He wants to decide what counts as inside. And Iran is different. Iran is not the backyard. Iran is the place where another pressure enters the room. Israel, regional power, private rumors. So no, this is not one clean strategy coming from one clean mind. It is messier than that. Old empire, new loyalists, foreign pressure, resource panic, anti-China fear, and Israel's war logic all found the same opening. And one president who turns all of it into noise simple enough to sell, winning, taking, making them pay, making them fold, making America great again. That is why the nonsense matters. Because the nonsense is not always a weakness. Sometimes it is the cover. One day he says one thing, the next day he says another. But underneath the contradiction, the direction keeps moving. Less alliance, more obedience. Less protection, more possession. Trump is not the full architect of this. He is the opening, the vessel, the permission structure. Old forces move better through a man who makes everything sound like instinct. And that is the real danger of the second Trump. Not that he created a new America, but that he gave the old one permission to come back without apology. And then came the one place where the old promise returned like an accusation: the Iran war. And it did not arrive with one explanation. It arrived with Israel already in the room, Netanyahu by his side, and Epstein hanging over them. All of it made people question whether public power was still public, or whether private leverage had entered the decision. Not only why America was fighting, but who America was fighting for. And then the cracks started showing. From inside the world that was supposed to defend him. Joe Kent, Trump's own counterterrorism chief, resigned publicly. And his letter did not sound vague. He said this was not America's war. It was a war started under pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby. That was the break. A Trump-aligned man inside the security state saying the anti-war promise had been betrayed. And he was not the only crack. Republicans broke on war powers. MAGA voices turned against the strike. That is where Iran became dangerous for him. Because it did not only challenge American power, it challenged Trump's image of control. And Iran understood that. So it fought the war on another battlefield. Iran turned American power into a joke. A president who built his comeback on winning, reduced to a puppet in someone else's story. And for Trump, that was humiliating. Because image is not decoration. Image is power. If he looks pushed, weak, used, and mocked, the whole performance starts to fall apart. So Iran became more than a war. It became Trump's trap. With America watching the man who promised no more stupid wars standing in one, surrounded by Israel, haunted by Epstein, mocked by Iran, abandoned by the system that was supposed to make the war look necessary, challenged by his own side, and still pretending this was what winning looked like. And this is where the second Trump becomes harder to watch. Because when control starts slipping, he does not become quieter, he becomes louder. The man who once sold strength now has to perform it every hour, because reality keeps refusing to obey the performance. Iran does not fold, Congress pushes back, MAGA cracks, Netanyahu has his own agenda, and Epstein will not disappear. And the war he was supposed to command keeps making him look commanded. So Trump does what Trump has always done. He turns the room into a spectacle. If one threat does not work, make a bigger one. If one story collapses, post another one. If the news cycle turns against him, flood it until nobody can breathe long enough to understand what just happened. That is why the social media chaos matters. It is not just a side detail. It is the presidency becoming noise. Late night storms, enemies resurrected, conspiracies amplified, AI images, religious symbolism, a deleted picture that made him look like a savior. And this becomes the pattern. Say the thing, let it explode, retreat just enough, then move to the next spectacle. Because spectacle is useful. It makes madness feel normal. It turns policy into entertainment, threats into content, war into branding, humiliation into another episode. And while everyone is asking, did he mean it? Is this a joke? Is he losing it? The machine keeps moving. A president can threaten a country, then claim peace is close. He can say America is winning while the world watches him being mocked. And somehow, Because it all looks like Trump being Trump. The shock wears off. That is how spectacle protects power. It makes the unacceptable familiar. It makes contradiction expected. It makes danger look like personality. And that is why nobody stops it. Because by the time the madness becomes visible, everyone has already been trained to call it noise. But it is not only noise. It is the sound of a man trying to look powerful, while the power around him becomes harder and harder to control. But spectacle alone does not explain why it keeps going. Noise can distract a country, it cannot run one. For that, you need people. And that is what changed the second time. The first Trump entered rooms where people still tried to slow him down. The second Trump returned to rooms built to move with him. Fewer breaks, more loyalists, less resistance, more obedience. But this was not only personal loyalty. It was preparation. The people around him had learned from the first term, not that Trump had gone too far, but that too many people had stopped him from going further. So the goal was no longer just to win the White House. It was to make the White House easier to obey by turning every limit into an enemy. So the chaos did not need to become organized, the people around it did. And Trump did not need to control every detail. He only needed to create the permission. And the machine did the rest. That is why nobody stops it. Because with the second Trump, the madness was no longer crashing into the system. The system was learning how to carry it. And maybe that is the real story of the second Trump. Not that he changed the slogan, but that the slogan stopped belonging only to the country. America was no longer only the country being promised a comeback. It became the instrument for old empire, for foreign pressure, for loyalists, for a machine that had learned how to say yes. And that is how the promise turns. Not into greatness, not into restoration, but into obedience. Obedience to force, obedience to spectacle, obedience to whoever can make fear sound like strength. And that is the cost. America stops looking like a country being repaired. The world stops knowing if America is an ally, a threat, or a weapon waiting to be pointed. And the people who were promised protection are left inside the thing they were told would save them. Not a country made great again, a country made dangerous enough that everyone has to bend around it. Subscribe to the channel for more.